Tuesday, December 9th. I'm Jim Chuck with Now Media. Also with me, Iain Burns, managing editor out in the nation's capital. Nice day here in the Okanagan. Beautiful, sunshiny kind of day, a little bit of cloud. We got lots to talk about in the really big show today. And the big one is pipeline to the West Coast, to be or not to be. Is it all about supply management, and who wins if it falls? Microsoft ups investment into AI in Canada. Is the new pipeline destined to be to the United States? Conflict of interest drives the Canadian economy. Housing shock coming to the economy. CBC carrying the water. Every time Carney meets with Trump, we get a new tariff. Canada and DEI. Get back to work, says Carney. Pressure mounts on EB. Trump dunks on Zelensky as Zelensky meets in the UK. And Pepsi to cut prices by 20%. That's amazing. JD Vance calls out the EU. And our theme always on this show seems to be it's all about energy. And LNG plays a big role when it comes to AI. All that and a lot more on the really, really big show. How's that? We did two reallys in the really big show. If you like what you see, like, share, comment on the best undiscovered Canadian news commentary channel on the internet. Coming to you on X, YouTube, Instagram, I don't know, coming to you from wherever you can find us. And like, share, hit the button, hit something. And we allow you to comment and engage with us, whereas the other big outlets in Canada, what they do is they silence their comments. But I was going to kick it off with this, though. At the G7 AI conference in Canada leads the G7 this year. They have the role of leadership. There we have the picture of the two biggest people in Canada, Evan Solomon and Melanie Joly, one in charge of AI, which is going to lead the world, and the other in charge of industry. Two of Canada's nation builders, striking a lot of confidence in a lot of people. But according to Evan Solomon, they've struck a deal or an alliance with Germany, another leader in AI. Evan Solomon has said Canada leads the world in AI. Not sure where, but and then he struck a deal with Germany. So they're going to deepen their partnership on AI and quantum tech and digital infrastructure and deliver concrete results for business workers in the next generation. Nice buzzwords, but not much. And then there are curling there. Curling and AI go hand in hand, do they not? I think a rock goes hand in hand.
Obvious, really, isn't it? What do you think when you think of AI? What do you think of immediately after? Curling, usually,
curling, of course. It's all about curling. But always the photo ops. Canada does lead in photo ops. They should probably just use AI to do the photo ops, maybe save some money. I think they spent $32,000 on that photo op for the Build Canada home. So how much did they spend on this photo op there at the curling rink?
They really should have done that in ChatGPT, shouldn't they? Just taken the photograph and then typed in, now put a house behind, or like a building site.
Would have been a lot cheaper on the Canadian taxpayer, that's for sure. But then we have another picture of Melanie Joly and Evan Solomon there, just hugging it up. Hugging it up. There you go.
That's what you need, isn't it? You need smiley hugs if you want to win in AI.
Canada leads in AI. But we do have some good news. We do have some good news. And Mark Carney is touting this right now. They're touting it as a bigger number, but Microsoft does deepen its commitment in Canada with landmark, they say $19 billion investment. A lot of that's already been made. There's an additional $7.5 billion that's going to be made in Canada in the next 2 years. So that total investment from 23 to 27 is 19 billion. But that additional $7.5 billion comes in the next 2 years. I mean, that's great. No doubt about it. We need something. But Canada, Microsoft does a lot in Canada with Azure. They have quite a few employees in Canada here, more than 5,300 across 11 cities nationwide, including Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, Quebec City, and some of the biggest cities here. And they believe that, and this is a lot with their Microsoft's AI diffusion, Canada, they say, Evan Solomon says Canada ranks #1 in AI, leads the world. Well, according to Microsoft, actually, Canada is 14th in the top 20 global economies. That's according to Microsoft. If you pull up that chart there at the bottom there, somewhere along the line there, you're going to see ahead of us, the United Arab Emirates, Singapore, Norway, Ireland, France, Spain, New Zealand, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Qatar, Australia, Israel, Belgium, and then Canada. You don't have it? There you go. You don't have it. Big news.
Still higher than Sweden, though.
What's that?
We're still higher than Sweden. Take that, Sweden.
Big news in the U.S. We talked about this yesterday and said that Donald Trump is going to be signing this one rule book for AI. He says if we're going to continue to lead in AI, we're going to beat all countries at this point. But that won't last long if we're going to have 50 states making different rules and approval processes. And that is what he's doing to attract investment in the United States. He's clearing the runway and speeding up approvals and regulations and all that stuff. And that's what we need to happen in Canada. And we seem to be even stumbling on building something as old as dirt, a pipeline, something we know how to build. We seem to be hitting nothing but stumbling blocks when it comes to pipelines. But he's clearing the runway for AI there. And speaking of pipelines, here we have Pierre Poilievre put forth this vote. He's going to force the Liberals to vote. Let's hear what he has to say.
I think the minister is suggesting that there are parts of his own MOU that he does not support. The MOU says there would be a pipeline to the Pacific. I took the wording right out of the agreement, that there would be an overriding of the tanker ban. I took the wording for that right out of the MOU. And now the Prime Minister is hiding under his desk. Liberal members on one side of the country are saying they're against, while they're pretending in Alberta that they are in favor. So why don't they stand up in the House of Commons, look Canadians in the eye, take one position, vote for a pipe to the Pacific, and override the tanker?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and all of us and all Conservative premiers and most people in this country supports every part of that MOU, Mr. Speaker. What's more, the Leader of the Opposition stands in his place and says to the people of Alberta, you know what? That little thing that they said was progress for our province, that made us a leader in renewable technologies, made us a leader in nuclear energy, made us a leader in interties, made us a leader in conventional electricity, that's all off. I just want this one thing. Alberta's
I don't even know what he was getting at the end there. I don't even, just ranting. I don't think
the best bit about that video is the mic was cut off at the end. Did you hear? And he just sounded like what he is, just a screaming hooligan in an empty hallway, just like blah, 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 blah. It's just like without the microphone to dignify him. It's a lot more honest, I think.
It's just comedy at the Parliament lots of times. But we got this interview here on this forced vote on the pipeline. We're going to get to what's going to happen as well, but listen to this first.
Yeah, I was going to ask you as well, bigger picture, what sort of strategy you think the Liberal government, and I appreciate you are a Conservative, but the strategy you think the Liberal government should be deploying here on this issue to make sure that, it doesn't become even more divisive for the Liberal caucus.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things they should be pretty aggressive out on media and platforms like yours and other programs is to say, look, the MOU. I mean, all the gamesmanship that we just described aside, the MOU between Prime Minister Carney and Premier Smith has enormous public support. I mean, it has more than 2/3 of Canadians. We know this from independent public research that's been done. Abacus has polling data out there. In British Columbia, in Quebec, the two regions of the country that were seen to be the most antagonistic towards this, it's a 2-to-1, even 3-to-1 net positive. The public wants to see reasonable accommodation. They want to see Canada become wealthier. They want to see Canada become less dependent on Donald Trump's America. They want to see our resources developed responsibly. They want to see partnership with Indigenous Canadians. They want to see us selling our products to global markets and creating Canadian jobs as a result of it. They want to see these things move forward. And so I think members of Parliament, certainly Liberals, who want to be ideological and put personal pique and their personal perspective ahead of the national interest, I think they're ultimately going to be the losers in this. And I think the Prime Minister should be finding ways to get the message out to Liberal MPs that the MOU you might have a little bit of discomfort with it, but it is still a process that has all kinds of opportunity for people to intervene with their perspectives. But the concept that the government of Canada would back away from our core campaign commitment, the reason why Prime Minister Carney is the Prime Minister is because he said he would do things like the MOU. He said that he would find compromise. He said that he would work with provinces and with premiers like Daniel Smith in order to get things done. So if you're voting against the MOU, you're voting against the reason why Prime Minister Carney was elected. So be very careful about what you're going to do tomorrow night. So it's a time for choosing for those Liberal MPs.
James Moore, former Conservative cabinet minister.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that what Poilievre did was a way to force them to vote, but then I think we talked yesterday is how they're going to figure out a way to vote no, because there's a lot of them that don't want to vote for this MOU. So how are they going to figure it out? And it looks like they have figured out a way. They just act angry and indignant, and that seems to be the way they're going to do it. And we're going to bypass this other clip that we were going to put in because it sounds like they're going to vote against this motion because they're going to say that it was a conservative trick and that they're not going to vote for it. And there was a lot of screaming from Tim Hodgson and the rest there saying, Poilievre is playing tricks so they can avoid voting for this MOU or this bill.
Well, they just did a press conference now, just like sort of still going on, I think, when we started. And it was the Environment Minister, Tim Hodgson, and some other people, just, random detritus from the Liberal Party. And they came and said, we are going to vote against it. And they said, one of the first things they said is,
put up that next slide.
This motion by the Conservative Party is a grievous insult to Indigenous people. Is it? Okay, well, if you say so. I mean, what the hell? And then there was just lots of anger from the Environment Minister. Then came out and said, "There's nothing here about reaching net zero. There's nothing here about reducing CO2 emissions." And okay, if you say so, cool. And then Hodgson said, "Oh, there's nothing here about carbon capture, which is going to be one of our great industries that we're going to export to the rest of the world. The rest of the world is going to come to us and beg us so that they could give us money in exchange for our carbon capture technology." And this stupidity from the Conservatives, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what I would say, looking at it from, somebody that doesn't have a horse in this race, or don't have a party or whatever, this is obviously a gimmick from the Conservative Party. It is. It's
they said it was. They said
this
it was.
is your bread and butter,
stuff, right? Yeah.
It's your bread and butter as an opposition leader. It's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. It was a lose-lose situation for the Liberal Party, and that they've called the Conservatives immature. They've called them saying that they're insulting democracy and all that. I mean, you could make that argument, but you could only really make that argument if your party was very serious and never did anything like this. But that's not true of the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party, as we discuss every single day, insults Canadians and Canadian democracy every single day when they refuse to release documents relating to things that belong to us, things that we pay for, but they refuse to release it. When they sit in committees and just yap and insult people that ask them questions rather than answer the questions and direct those answers to us, the Canadian people. The Liberal Party plays these games every day and insults Canadians every single day. For them now to stand on a soapbox and say the immature Conservatives who've once again blah blah, it's like you can't do that. You have absolutely no justification for doing that. There's no authenticity to what you're doing. There's no honesty. So I would say they can have each other. They're suited to one another because they're both taking the piss.
Yeah, and they're pushing this the carbon capture, sustainability stuff, and there's no market for that stuff. The Americans sold LNG to Germany, Japan, South Korea, all without carbon capture. And if Canada doesn't sell it to Spain, likely the Americans will sell it to Spain as well without carbon capture.
And there's absolutely no suggestion that it seems to me anyway from the research I've done, there is no evidence that anybody else is interested in this technology. I don't know where they've got this idea in their heads. I don't know. I think they've maybe been to too many conferences with leaders of France and Britain and the Netherlands and Germany and so on. Those countries that are not really up to much, let's say, and certainly don't represent the world. And they really don't represent a significant amount of CO2 emissions. It's more kind of, it's fantasy, really, isn't it? It's what they wish was true.
The new taxation scheme, really what it is. It's a new taxation scheme. It's a way to skim fat off the energy industry at the detriment of the Canadian public. It's really what it's all about.
Well, that's certainly, it's been criticized for that many times from both ends of the spectrum, by the way. That's not a right-wing or conservative critique. That is also, you also hear that from the left.
Even Gibbon said
and you see that
it's
people
not
like Bill
effective
Paul,
enough.
Elizabeth May, they're not really impressed by this idea, by this technology. It's not something that the progressive left, environmental left, is calling for, really.
But
they don't really want carbon capture. What they want is, it's been criticized as fantastical nonsense, but they want an entire decarbonization of energy production. That's what they want, but that's not what this is.
Yeah, but you know who does like CCUS? Brookfield. They've invested billions and billions of dollars in CCUS, and then America walked away from it. And that's why we're starting to see American companies move to Canada so they can access the very, very generous tax credits. I think there's one that's already moved to Alberta there. And it's tapping the taxpayer for about 75 cents on the dollar. That's not too bad on tax credits. And then the ability to sell those carbon capture credits to the energy companies that are forced to buy them, basically a form of taxation. Pretty sweet deal. And that's a new industry, apparently. That's a new industry. CCUS is an industry.
The ultimate rationale, the ultimate justification is that we need to save the planet. That we're not messing around here. This is not optional. We need these heavy subsidies. We need to give so much financial, political emphasis to this, priority to this, because it's about saving the planet. Of course, Canada contributes. The usual figure is 1.5%. Sometimes it's less than that as well. It depends on where you check. But pitiably, pathetically low and insignificant contribution to CO2 emissions. So that justification right off the bat is absurd. You can disprove that in 20 seconds of thinking about it or researching it. So that's another factor. But that is how they get away with it. They get away with that because that's the justification. We're saving the planet, bro. Like, that's why we're doing this. But so rarely do we hear that obvious criticism, even from the Conservative Party. When was the last time you heard the Conservative Party make that argument? I can't remember the last time I heard that.
I haven't heard it either. This is the one that you said a long time ago, that it really seems to be about this. This is what's stalling. The real reason that the trade talks are stalled is the supply management agreements, and it seems to be coming up again. The U.S. ambassador, encouraged by Carney's energy pact with Alberta, expects more oil shipments to the U.S. This is part of it, though. And I keep saying that the likely pipeline is going to be the Keystone one. Even though this fight with BC, this fight with Quebec, and it's likely going to be a pipeline that goes south. And Hoekstra is saying that they would like the oil, and they do want the oil. There's no doubt about it that the Americans want Canadian oil. They want all the energy they can get because AI wants all the energy they can get. It's really all about the energy. It is all about energy. And yes, the Americans
literally said that in that Politico interview that was just released this morning. He said exactly what you said. We have direct, clear evidence that the U.S. administration thinks exactly as you've just said. The evidence is right there. He just said energy is everything. If you get cheap energy, you get cheap everything. That's, paraphrasing what he said.
And you heard it first here on this show for months and months and months. What do we say all the time? If we had a slogan, it would be, it's all about energy. And now, obviously, we should be hated because somebody else is agreeing with us that Canada's been taught to dislike. But it's all about energy. It's all about energy. Alberta has the trump card. The Liberals and the NDP continue to try and suppress that trump card. Carney knows that trump card. Carney knows, and he's playing it. And he's playing it to Brookfield's benefit. He's saying, yeah, you can have the energy shipped wherever you want to ship it, as long as you feed the fatted calf, and that is Brookfield, who has invested billions and billions of dollars into CCUS and has nowhere to sell that other than Canada right now. Nobody else is interested. Even that company that came Carbon Capture USA that came to Canada said their technology doesn't work anywhere else in the world, only in Canada because of the very lucrative tax credits in Canada. And you know what tax credits mean? That means you, the taxpayer, pays for it. 75 cents on the dollar, that means they're not paying taxes. That means you need to pay more taxes as they take your tax dollars. Pretty sweet deal.
And that means less fiscal room, as they say, basically less money available to subsidize other things like starving children or whatever it may be.
Right.
You know, it's a choice, a very, very serious, very consequential and difficult choice to make. And they've made it apparently quite quickly and quite easily.
And this is the other part of that I was alluding to. Supply management. It sounds like supply management has been on the table, and you said that. Look, again, if you watch this show all the time, you're going to be leading the way, because we talked about this a long time ago and said supply management is what's blocking this free trade deal. And the Liberals actually put a bill forward that blocked any even negotiation. I remember that. That was early on when Carney took government, that they put a bill forward that blocked any negotiation on supply management. They said this is a non-starter. Well, it looks like it's going to be
supported by the Conservative Party as well. Right. Let's not forget.
Yeah, and you know the bloc, everybody, like this is a non-starter. But it sounds like this may be. And who wins if supply management gets knocked off? Who wins? The consumer wins. The consumer wins because the price of eggs, the price of chicken, the price of everything goes down. Because right now, the Americans get very little access to our market for competition as far as that goes. And this would bring in a lot more competition. Under CUSMA, the U.S. gets less than 5% of Canada's agricultural products market. Imagine if all of a sudden there was competition coming into Canada for milk and dairy and all that other stuff, chicken, all this supply management stuff. It would really benefit the consumer. It would be huge. It would be a huge drop in inflation. So the Canadian public should be demanding the end of supply management. The food professor did a really good interview, really outlining how damaging this is to the consumer supply management. Sure, the farmers make out like bandits on it, but and a lot of them actually don't. Then they're they're pouring milk into the drains. A lot of them are angry about it as well.
And they do complain now and then because the prices are set, aren't they? And so they do complain sometimes that it's not good enough. But in response to the argument that you've just made, the argument in favor of ditching supply management, that's we know what that is. And it's not just related to the US, by the way. This is also related to the European Union and Britain. Countries that the Liberals keep saying that we have free trade with those countries. Kind of. You know, if you went on, what's that website, Snopes fact check or whatever, they would say like partially true, kind of. It's not really true that we have free trade with those countries because the deal, in both cases, both deals, can't get quite over the line because of supply management. Same is true when we try and do a trade deal with anybody, anywhere in the world.
UK
this
as
comes
well.
up again and again and again.
It's been knocked off because of that. The UK is the stumbling block, is supply management.
So if like me, you think that the English people have a unique genius for creating cheese, you would be happy if supply management was abolished, because then we would get real cheese in this country, like Stilton, real cheddar, actual real cheddar, rather than orange slime out of a tub. But anyway,
I like my cheese made out of oil. I like my cheese made out of oil.
But there are those advantages, whatever. But the argument in favor of supply management, I should say, or the argument against abolishing it, is that we have higher quality food now. It would be like horrible, crappy American food. That's usually that's one of the sort of tactics used to scare people. But then the other one is similar to what Jolie said about steel. It's like there are some things that are just so important that they must be all entirely in-house. So we mustn't allow our farms to deteriorate or lose so much of the market that we rely on America for staples. That's quite a strong argument, but yeah, I mean, those are the arguments given anyway. You can talk about, you can sort of hash that out all you want, but at the end of the day, this is a political question. We're not really talking about economics. We're not really talking about reality, real life, things that actually matter. We're talking about politics, and particularly we're talking about Quebec. We're talking about that country within a country that almost 100% of the time gets exactly what it wants. This is just another example of Quebec getting what it wants, even from the Conservative Party, which pretends, particularly under Pierre Poilievre, The Conservative Party pretends to believe in freedom. That's their number one word. They might as well walk around with freedom tattooed on their head. They want free markets, open markets. They want competition, except when it comes to supply management, because we need to win seats in Quebec and we're too spineless to tell the truth.
Yeah, somebody in the comments there just said $61 for silver. I was going to put that in today. We used to do a market report and we stopped because we have so much stuff we want to cover. But I do want to make note of that. Silver broke $60 today. So $60 for silver. So silver on a tear, and we talked about that quite like months back about how silver was on its way. So $60.08 right now silver is, and gold at 42.08 in Yankee Doodle dollars, but in Canadian dollars 58.27 for gold. Wow, hey, crazy. And can you guess what silver would be in Canadian dollars? That one silver doubloon there.
It's like the 17th century again.
Prime Minister Carney, they're trying to force him to sell his shares in Brookfield, but I mean, conflicts of interest, they're all over the place, and I said that's what's probably tearing the Liberal Party apart a little bit. Is Carney's driven by the interest of Brookfield by the looks of it, where the Liberal Party, a lot of them is still driven by ideologues. And so that's the difference, I would think. And that's what's causing some of the grief, because Prime Minister Carney's future earnings rely on the success of Brookfield. No SHI Sherlock, right? And the Ethics Commissioner said that yesterday. Opposition MPs seek to compel Carney to sell his stock portfolio. Scott Bessett said in the United States, he doesn't have a stock portfolio because he was sold it all. Because he said there is no such thing as a blind trust. Apparently in Canada there is. If you're Mark Carney, it's clear Mark Carney's future compensation is tied to the success of Brookfield. And that's what the Commissioner Conrad, here's a good name, von Finkenstein. Never heard a name like that for a while. Vondelare, testified that that's at the Commons Ethics Committee. And in order to avoid making decisions which can seem to benefit Brookfield and therefore indirectly himself, first of all, he has to put everything in a blind trust, which blind trust. I mean, if you have all your shares in Brookfield, then you know you have all your shares in Brookfield. How blind is that?
Also, blind trust that's managed by your underlings.
Yeah.
Literally your servants, your slaves. It's like, come on.
And
people whose entire life, livelihood, career, everything is dependent on you. That's who manages it. Do you think that's fair?
And he wasn't supposed to have meetings with Brookfield executive, but he did already. Why not?
Yeah, but they didn't bring it up. Apparently they exclusively discussed anti-Semitism.
Or
didn't
curling.
mention
Maybe curling.
anything to do with Brookfield. Obviously they didn't. But this really is, we check CBC every day just as a bit of a,
you
to
look
take
right
the
now?
mickey.
Let's take a look. Let's take a look.
Let's do it. But sometimes we do that and we're being a little bit arch. We're being a little bit cheeky. But when it comes to this is completely serious. This is completely pork-faced. It is an absolute disgrace that this is not the main story in every single outlet across Canada. This is the biggest news story in weeks.
I'm looking there right now, and we're waiting to see if Nick can pull up the CBC website, but I don't see anything. Zelensky buoyed by European allies. We're going to talk about Zelensky later here. Liberals to vote against Polyev. You can scroll down.
Like dog poo, historic Nova Scotia garden gets smelly surprise from tree.
Can Carney still put together a credible climate plan? Nope. Don't see anything on this conflict of interest. Nothing. Zero. Nada. Squat.
Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, we got a story there. And Florida, something about Florida.
No. Back to the story, though. Records showed Carney disclosed vast stock holdings on July 11th, months after becoming prime minister and campaigning in that general election. And they said they're working very closely with prime minister's office to manage all of his conflicts. There's a lot. Brookfield has like 2,000 connections and subsidiaries and all that. And that huge company, one of Canada's trillion-dollar companies, has its office where? In a bike shop in the Bahamas.
In the Big Apple.
on the bike shop in the Bahamas. And it is one of Canada's largest...
headquarters in New York.
Yeah, headquarters in New York, but its office there. in the bike shop for tax reasons, and it's dodged over $6.5 billion of taxpayer money. That, he says he's just following the rules. And Obama even said that the Bahamas tax scheme is one of the worst in the world, and Brookfield takes advantage of it. Well, it takes advantage of you.
But the pressure, to change something like this would require pressure. Pressure can only come from the main media outlets talking about it.
Yeah.
The average voter, I think, is only very vaguely aware of this. They don't know that the ethics commissioner, somebody who's, supposed to be in a sort of neutral watchdog role, they don't know that he's come out and condemned, in like astonishing language, condemned, whether he meant to or not, the prime minister, and basically said that he's compromised. This prime minister is compromised because his personal fortune depends upon the success of a company, and that company is gigantic and has business all over Canada. So obviously, it's a conflict of interest. This is the kind of thing, if this was happening at Kelowna City Council or something like that, every newspaper in Kelowna would be talking about it non-stop. It would be an endless conversation about, this councillor, it's an obvious conflict of interest. He has to, divest. We have to do something about it. But because it's the Prime Minister of Canada, somehow, because it's too important, the people that support him consider this too important, that they won't talk about it because they don't want to sink his popularity, sink his reputation. This is just corruption. I honestly, what other word do you have to describe this? It's not money in a suitcase delivered to some corrupt politician, but it's corruption nonetheless.
The CCUS one is one of the worst of it, because Brookfield, if you just go on the internet and search Brookfield and CCUS and just do a search, and you're going to see that Brookfield invested billions and billions of dollars. Don't forget that Mark Carney led the net zero alliance with all the banking and financial institutions. Listen to some of the language. We've played it over and over and over again. Like, they've invested tons in CCUS. And the only way to recoup that money in that investment is through Canada right now, because nobody else is buying into it. It's just Canada. The Americans sure aren't doing it. And nobody cares to whether they buy the LNG, whether it has CCUS on it or not, because it's the same LNG at the end of the day. This is a tax scheme, and it's a pretty complicated one at best. And remember when he was running in the election, they were trying to portray him as a man of meager means. And I said, either he's the worst CEO ever or he's lying, because he was running one of Canada's largest corporations. And if he was and didn't make any money running that corporation, didn't have a ton of stock options and all that kind of stuff, I'd say he's got to be one of the worst CEOs ever. Turns out he did okay. So that must mean.
And not only is he wasn't only a CEO, but there's more context there. He was an extremely high-ranking sort of public official, wasn't he, in 2 G7 countries, and also at the UN. That the networks that you're granted access to by having jobs like that, like, the money is just. And governors. It's up to you how much money you make, really, isn't it? Like, you decide the figure.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like, people say, "Oh, well, he's just using the existing laws to dodge taxes. That he's entitled to that." Well, the sad reality is he was part of the government as an economic advisor that influenced tax policy. So he knew then. Why is he taking advantage of loopholes that he could have closed for 5 years?
And he still can now. Why is he not doing it right now?
What's that?
He can do it right now. Why is he not doing it right now? That's the other question. I mean, we can talk about the past. Why not right now?
Why hasn't legislation been enacted right now to close the loophole and force Brookfield out of the Bahama bike shop? We don't know.
Because he knows it inside out. He knows exactly how it works. He could even write the law himself. How rare is that? A prime minister could literally write the law. Why is he not doing that?
So what is the reaction from the Liberals when, we're talking about conflict of interest? This is from Holly and Blacklocks again. Start screaming, just like they did today on the MOU bill. Start screaming how ethics have been weaponized. So Liberal MP, once censured for breach of conflict of interest code, yesterday complained ethic rules have been weaponized. the first parliamentary ever ordered by the ethics minister to apologize to the comments, said no public office should be subject to a bunch of allegations. So imagine that. When Jason Jacques came out and said the budget was unsustainable, stupefying, all these things, what did they do? They went after Jason Jacques. And here we go. Now that the conflict of interest minister says, or ethics commissioner says that there's a conflict, we bring out ethics are being weaponized. Imagine that, eh?
But that's, I mean, I'm glad to see that we have our friend and Mark Carney defender lightning rod in the comments here. How is that language different from the literally precisely the same language used by Donald Trump when he talks about the justice system? And he's been condemned so vehemently for that, hasn't he? For saying that the justice system has been weaponized against me. How is this different? Is it just because it's the Liberals, therefore it's right? I think that seems to be the extent of the logic.
Yeah, so they're going to start screaming how it's been weaponized and how we need to not do this. And again, where is the coverage on CBC? Where is the coverage on CBC? The state-funded broadcaster that gets $1.55 billion, tax dollars, your money.
But it's given to them by, and it's entirely coincidental, but that money is given to them by the Liberal Party of Canada.
9 current and former Liberal MPs were censured for breach of Conflict of Interest Act or companion code for MPs since 2015, including then Justin Trudeau, President of the Privy Council, Dominic LeBlanc, Trade Minister Mary Nigg, I don't know if I pronounced her name right, Bill Munro, Greg Fergus, and on and on and on. Why not, eh? But then just scream that it's being weaponized.
Did you see the, I don't know if you actually read this quote out, but the same guy that made this claim as weaponized said, I find this not only wrong, but incredibly offensive.
Of course, you just act indignant, you act sanctimonious, and just like scream, and then...
What a thing to find offensive. Like, God, these people are like, we talk about AI a lot on here. How much more sophisticated and subtle and nuanced would ChatGPT inside of a humanoid robot be than this person? You know, like how many orders of magnitude more sophisticated would that be than this pitiful human being?
It's disheartening. And then I do a weekly show, and I'm actually, Renee's going to be on today, actually, as well. It's Tuesday. And we do a show, and we talk about construction. And construction is falling off, and then a lot of the layoffs are coming too. And this is the slowing housing market will trigger construction job losses, and that's from an Ontario group. And then that is happening across Canada. We're starting to see cranes come down, not go back up, and especially in British Columbia here with the uncertainty with what the NDP have done with the DRIPA rules, and we'll talk about that story in a bit as well.
That just gets worse and worse, doesn't it? I mean, it's not going away, that. Yeah. Purely in the economic sense that you're talking about, that's not going to... Investor confidence is not being shored up. Quite the opposite.
And then the other one is, we've seen so many stories on this jail, not bail, and in Kelowna, the mayor wrote the letter. We've had, I'm just going to pull these numbers out, like that. I think it was, if my memory serves me correct, 1,300 files on one individual, 32 failures to comply, 32 failures to appear, and all that kind of stuff. Just how many does it take before you hold somebody in jail? And then now look at the CBC doing the work for the Liberals and making sure, like, how can we put more people in jail? The jails will be too full. Let's listen in here.
Well, new this morning, a CBC data investigation has found Ontario jails are heading towards a record year of overcrowding, remand populations and lockdown. That it's all happening as politicians are debating new tough on-crime bail reforms that could bring even more prisoners into Ontario jails. Valerie Ouellette joins me now in studio with more on this CBC investigation. So, Valerie, thanks so much for this. So, walk us through the data and what you've been able to find.
Well, we've been hearing these words, jail, not bail, for months now. So this message that that our bail system is too lenient, that it's creating revolving doors for violent criminals, and that the way to fix that would be to keep more people in jail. My colleague Julie Ayrton and I wanted to know if there were hard numbers behind the debate, and so we asked the Ontario provincial government to give us figures on correctional statistics. And so this is what we found. So the first finding is really that jail population has increased exponentially by 30% since 2019. And so that dip that you originally see, that's in the very early days of the pandemic when we released prisoners to prevent the spread of COVID-19. But as you can see, it almost immediately increased. And we're now at a point where there's 3,000 more prisoners than before for the same number of beds in jail. And you can also see that has led to overcrowding. So we are now in a position where the vast majority of jails are overcrowded all the time. It is no longer an instance that is occasional. It has become the norm. As you can see, there's 3 jails that are the most overcrowded as of this summer. And the first one is the Vanier Center for Women, because that's another trend that we've seen, is that women population have increased significantly more over the past few years. And then the last thing that we found is that remand rates in Ontario jails are higher than ever. In fact, these overcrowded jails that I was just mentioning, they're full of people already who have been denied bail and are waiting for their trial. So we were surprised to find that, again, trends related to women are coming up. So women are detained on remand.
I wonder if they, even in their head, they come up with the question, why is crime going up? Why, all these people that were released, and you have the jails, there's more people in jail. Perhaps we should look at what's causing all the crime. Could it be the Liberal policies? Could it be the economy? What is it? Instead of just like, oh, the jails are overcrowded, so release more people out into the public. Oh, they reoffend, and then somebody gets hurt. Meh. At least the jails aren't overcrowded.
Once again, we have access to the future. We can literally see the future. Go onto this secret website called bbcnews.com, and you'll see this exact thing has happened in England. And we discussed this months ago. They even released violent criminals, prisoners, out of jail because they didn't have any space anymore. And they said, time and time again, they've said, we can't make our laws more severe. We can't make our laws stricter because we don't have space in the prisons. We're already releasing criminals halfway through their sentence because we don't have space in the jail. And that's kind of it's almost like giving up, isn't it? It's like, oh, well, we don't have enough jail space, so let's not enforce the laws.
Immigration had anything to do with this. If you add 1.5 million people in a year, I wonder if that had anything to do with it.
Well, certainly statistically, it's young people that commit crimes. It's negligible how much crime old people commit. It's basically nothing. It's very rare. It's young people that commit crimes. And likewise, it's very rare that old people are immigrants. For obvious reasons, countries don't want old people. They want young people. So most immigrants are young. Most criminals are young. You are inevitably going to increase your, the amount of crime in your country, just purely based on that, on nothing else but that, on age. So
we got
that's
more
certainly
on this.
a factor. But I just want to emphasize here what they missed there. This woman who talked about, this reporter talked about exponential increase. I just want to say exponential is a word that actually means something. That chart did not show an exponential increase, but that's just me being very picky. But I'd also say, why is this all focused on a slogan, jail not bail? It should be focused on the incompetence of the bureaucrats and the people who are told to maintain these jails. Those are the people who should be criticized here. All of the attention should be on them. Why don't we have enough jail spaces? It's not about, why are we increasing the severity of sentences and trying to put more people in jail? That shouldn't be the question. The question should be, why are we so incompetent and useless as a society, as a country, as a province, whatever, that we can't even create enough spaces in jails so that we can hide away violent people from the rest of us?
The easiest thing that comes out is she says the jails are too full. Well, shouldn't the next question be, why are the jails filling up? Why are the crime rates higher? Why are we releasing tons of people, yet the jails continue to fill up? What is going on in Canada? What is causing the increase in crime? That would be the better question. Instead of the jails are too full, let's release people.
But you have to remember as well that the CBC is informed by progressive ideology. That's their philosophy, is progressivism. Some people obviously call it a religion, but that's what informs their worldview. And according to the progressive worldview, when it comes to things like crime, that crime is a consequence of discrimination, poverty, gender inequality, in general. It's all these sort of like society does it to people. That's what increases crime. So you really have to remember that they don't really believe in individual agency or anything like that. Progressives don't, I mean. So when they're talking about a subject like this, they're not going to ask that question that you asked. You aren't a religiously progressive person. You don't subscribe to that faith or that ideology. So naturally, it came to you, but it's not going to come to them, because that's not like, if anything, if this conversation had just gone on and on and on, they would have started to talk about things like, why are the laws discriminating against people to such an extent? Or, what do we do to improve economic opportunities for people who commit crimes and things like that? That's how they see the world. That's how they see morality and ethics. So I think it's a very deep question. It's a very sort of complex issue.
Every time Mark Carney meets with Donald J. Trump, we seem to get a new tariff. And this time he's talking about putting it on potash. Let's listen to this.
Fertilizer plays another role. Now, a lot of that, the way I understand it, it comes in from Canada, different countries like that. What are we doing to bolster domestic fertilizer production to help make that more affordable? And then I think that will transition
one
down
of the
the pipe.
things, a lot of it does come in from Canada, and so we'll end up putting very severe tariffs on that if we have to, because that's the way you want to bolster here, and we can do it here. We can all do that here, but I would say what you do, you put very severe tariffs on from coming into other countries. You'll be making your own fertilizer very soon.
In fact, Secretary Burgum.
That's good. Yeah. He had that meeting in there with a bunch of farmers, and they were talking about, we're going to talk about a little bit later, China soybeans and all that kind of stuff, and rice and everything, and John Deere tractors. It was actually a good thing for farmers that they're going to cut a lot of the environmental stuff off the John Deere tractors and that. So the farmers in the room there were fairly pleased with what's going on. I never thought Canadian potash would get attacked, though, because potash is one of the things that's tough to find in the world. And Saskatchewan is very, very rich in potash. And another country comes to mind, and that would be Ukraine, as far as that goes. But Canada, very rich in the potash. And
Belarus, they also produce, and Russia.
And then, but Nutrien, this is another loss for Canada. Nutrien decided to go to the Washington to put their port. So I don't know how much Canadian potash will be affected, because they're already shipping their stuff through the a Washington port as opposed to Vancouver. And David Eby acted all indignant about that as well, saying nobody talked to him. Well, because you're almost impossible to talk to, I think that's what people say.
This clip from Trump, I don't think that's one to add to the highlight reel. My instinct is that he doesn't know what he's talking about.
I don't think
and
so.
The farmers in
potash
that room
seems fairly safe. So to me, anyway. But.
Well, it would just be suicidal. And the farmers in that room, they probably were like, at that time, they're trying to be on their best behavior because they don't want to alienate the president of the United States. Sensible, one might say. But deep down, they'll be freaking out. And if he did do something like that, they would turn against him, I'm sure. They would be furious with him, because that's about yields, isn't it? That's like fertilizer.
So
you can't really have, like, they have such a successful and productive agricultural system. It wouldn't be that without potash. And they're not going to realistically replace Canadian supply.
Yeah, he didn't know anything about it, so he was just asking
Russia.
around the room too. He's just like, what's going on? What's going on? And he was acting like Elon Musk. Deal with it then. But yeah, likely
we can
potash
make pots. We can make pots in the United States.
But you know what else Canada leads in other than CCUS, which Brookfield benefits from? DEI. DEI, because DEI'd in the United States. But in Canada, ramping up. We're going to show you this in the next couple of stories. But first, let's listen to this and see what you get out of this.
Misogyny now has a new name. Manospheres. There are clubs, podcasts, books, and influencers who use these platforms to radicalize young males through a combination of algorithmic design, social dynamics, and exposure to extremist ideologies. Remember these words, Mr. Speaker. Algorithmic amplification, gamification of hate, normalization of misogyny, recruitment of vulnerable men, and lack of counter-messaging. These are all the enemies of human rights, and they are the new wave of violence against women and diverse genders. Right now, the Winnipeg Human Rights Museum draws the country's attention to the fact, and I quote from their website, that a growing number of men spread hateful ideas about women, trans, and non-binary people online. Some internet communities even encourage and celebrate gender-based violence. Researchers have called for a variety of regulatory and technical improvements to reduce the reach and harmfulness of radical, hateful internet content. Simply banning users who engage in hate speech, deplatforming them, has been shown to reduce their reach. Legislatures must take action on this immediately.
Welcome to the UK.
I think pretty much, or Europe in general. We got to give a shout out to those LGBT themed feather earrings, though. Just for starters, that is impressive, isn't it? That's like, that really is going the extra mile. But once again, look, I'm going to ask you a question here. I don't really know the answer to this question, but we have someone that I think it's pretty safe to say is an extremist there. That woman, it sounds to me, maybe I'm an extremist, but she sounds to me like an extremist. She sounds like she's gone off the deep end, and she's talking about extraordinary measures, authoritarianism, all the rest of it, like condemning men and things like that, like with huge categories of people. But part of her spiel was talking about extremists, what she says are extremists, and how she wants to get rid of these extremists. What my question is, what do you do then? So we've got an extremist talking about how we have to root out extremism and extremists. What's the answer to that conundrum? How do we untie ourselves?
She's the decider of the extremists, though. So the extremist is deciding who the extremists are.
But if they outlaw people who consider her to be an extremist and say, no, I'm not the extremist, you're the extremist. You're going to be banned. You're going to jail. We're going to disconnect your internet or something like that. What's next? That's a very, very serious question, and I really don't know the answer.
Well, how much money do you have that you'd like to give to the federal government? Because they have, like I said, the DEI died in the United States, but it's alive and well in Canada. There are 577 diversity staffers for the federal department, almost 600 promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and that's from records. Cabinet acknowledged that the figure was incomplete since numerous departments declined to report how many managers worked on representation goals. Okay. Major employers, including the RCMP, Departments of Health, Justice, Natural Resources, Public Works, declined to report. We saw one of the people, one of the RCMP spokespersons said that if you have traditional values, you're an extremist. Remember that when she said that? If you have traditional family values, you could be linked to extremism. Okay.
To be fair, she was remarking on things that were way outside of her job role, a pay grade, I think. But yeah, that was an amusing moment.
The Environment Department said it could not disclose figures since it had no project code for diversity. So a lot more than 577 that are disclosed. How that? The Department of Immigration declined and said paperwork's too difficult. Paperwork's too difficult. Isn't that all they do is push paper around? Isn't that the definition of a bureaucrat? Paperwork is too difficult. The Department of Foreign Affairs said there's just way too many to count. So 577 is way low number. The department manages an extensive network of 182 missions in 112 countries. Why? I guess another question. Right there, if you said that, Canada has 182 missions in 112 countries. Why? Canada needs to like come back, fix Canada, and then decide that they want to fix the rest of the world. Unbelievable.
But it's another thing to, you're saying DEI is dead in the US. It's also dead or dying in lots of other places, including to some extent in England, even though Britain has a left-wing government. You know, that things are changing over there too.
You know what?
Canada increasingly is becoming the very last country that's all in on this.
Yeah, that's what the WEF had its stranglehold and claws on Canada because it needs to hang on to. The Department of Fisheries had 10 employees working on diversity programs. I guess the fish are demanding it.
Yeah, you should have a diversity of fish in your catch. You don't just want to eat the same fish over and over again.
95 employees in the Department of Industry were assigned to diversity. 95 employees at Melanie Joly's cabinet. 95 employees were assigned to
Makes
diversity.
sense, yeah. Department of Industry. Got to diversify your industry.
On Black History Month, they spent $11,000 on freeing ourselves from imposter syndrome. I don't even know what that is.
That's very useful for Melanie Joly. I think that's a course for her to go on.
I don't know. Cabinet spent, since 2016, you ready for the number? Over $1 billion on diversity, equity, inclusion programs.
But how many BC ferries would that get you? How many passenger ferries? About 4?
I'm sure this story is on CBC. I missed it though. I missed it.
They probably the more likely story that you'd read on CBC is that Blacklock is racist for writing this story.
And this one here is what they're trying to figure out is how to fire Jason Jacques or not give him the job, the permanent role. And so what they're doing is soft selling this. The Privy Council office yesterday dismissed a request from MPs to interview candidates for appointment as budget officer. A standoff over the key appointment will now drag into 2026. So they're just going to drag this out, and because they're going to try and really silently kind of like just move Jason Jacques out, I think. The Privy Council is required under the Privacy Act to safeguard identities of individuals who applied for the governor in council appointments. The committee on November 20th voted 5-4 to ask for names of candidates for interviews. This is a process to gain consensus from all parties.
Well, I mean, the name would be wrong otherwise. I mean, as it stands, the name is wrong, isn't it? It's a misnomer, parliamentary budget office or officer, because it's not really parliamentary budget officer. It's more like cabinet budget officer or government budget officer, isn't it? At present.
Yeah, the person that had the job before Jason Jacques, Giroux, testified in 2023 hearing of the Commons Industry, and I work for the benefit of the taxpayers and Canadians. I don't have a vested interest in a political party. But that's what they're supposed to do. As Giroux's interim successor, Jason Jacques, a budget analyst of 27 years, he's got experience. So, I mean, they're trying to say he doesn't. He doesn't have tact, they said. Went further into warning deficit spending is very alarming, stupefying, shocking, unsustainable. And that was in the September 25th Government Operations Committee. And he said it was very serious. The most important word in the release, unsustainable, said Jacques. We choose it carefully. I've been in the budget office 17 years. I've worked in the federal government putting together budgets for 10 years prior to that, for the total of 27. You choose this word with prudence and care, and I'm a CPA as he is. You do be careful what you say when you don't want to be an alarmist, but he didn't use the word lightly, but he said it anyway. So that's what I said when he said it. Like, you need to really take notice of the word unsustainable. Unsustainable means you don't have the option of saying maybe it'll take a couple of years to see how things go. It means if you don't change, this is done. And like I said, they're working on a way to softly, silently move him along while they put in somebody that is more conducive to just shutting up. How's that?
Indeed. And that previous fellow, Giroux, he was good at that, wasn't he? He was good at shutting up.
And this is not going to go over well with the federal employees. Carney says he's focused on a plan of getting public servants back to work. And then this, because right now they're only supposed to go in 3 days a week. Tough slugging. And it was 2 years they were out since COVID. I have a friend that works in Treasury. And she said the day they went back to work, It was like chaos there. People were screaming and they're in the new office. They're screaming and how unsafe they felt and everything. And
Unsafe, offensive. I'm sure it was very offensive.
And then we did a story on the D&D last year around December, around this time last year. How 80, I think it was 80+% didn't even show up for the 3 days a week. I wonder if the soldier in the Canadian military can say that. I'm going to work from home today. No, you're supposed to be out in the ditch there. No, I'm working from home today. Hey, can you do that?
Oh, what about the guy who is responsible, like the caretaker in the House of Commons, who's responsible for like getting the heat right and cleaning and all the rest of it?
Working from home.
What if he just said, I'm going to work from home this week, lads?
Well, we did that yesterday with we said it's Christmas bonus time in Ottawa, Christmas bonus time, and 90 to 100% of the people get their bonuses, even the one that didn't go to work, because she filed a complaint because she wasn't at work and she didn't get her bonus, the $177,000 a year employee of the CRA. She didn't get her bonus of $5,000, so she filed a complaint and then she got her bonus. Lo and behold, hey, bonus time.
The best bit about this story, though, is the guy that beat Pierre Poilievre in Carleton, which is near Ottawa. Yeah, who says we have to keep the flexibility in place to make sure that we can attract high-quality workers and also reduce carbon emissions.
That's your old card. You play that one all the time. You want to reduce carbon emission, pay people less so they have less money to spend on goods. How about that, Bruce? Cut their salaries in half, and then they'll have less money to spend on products, and that will cut their carbon emissions. How about cutting your salary, Bruce? Cut your salary in half. Cut all this travel, junkets. What was that? What was the name of the Speaker of the House? Greg Fergus. He spent $300,000 in a year on junkets. Why don't we cut his budget to zero?
Yeah, he had a world tour, didn't he?
Imagine that. Here's our friend. We've interviewed him in the past. Sean Fraser, now the Justice Minister. He says the Liberals are set to introduce legislation that will protect children and women. Shouldn't we have been protecting them all along? This is a UK bill that's been pushed through as well. It seems like all of a sudden everybody wants to protect women and children, but under the women they have another category there. Protect them. Why haven't we been protecting them? Shouldn't we always protect them? Generational reforms to criminal law. What generational reforms? How they always pitch stuff. And here's one that's going to cause some grief. I don't know how Canada continues to monitor U.S. boat strikes in Caribbean. The federal government says that the U.S. killings of alleged drug traffickers in the Caribbean Sea is actions it's labeled as unilateral. At least 87 people have been killed since September. I wonder what they're saying about the stuff they want to do deals with India, China. They did that big BC Ferries deal. China has been known to have human rights violations. Like, we probably couldn't even list them all off before the end of the year here if we just sat here and listed the human rights violations in China. How long would it take?
I mean, in India's got a lot of, there's a lot of bad stuff going on in India, as you're probably not even slightly surprised to learn. But I'm sure that Canada is monitoring those situations as well.
Yeah. We've talked about this since it IPO'd. Group Dynamite, which is Garage, right? Garage. Forever 21 in Garage. This thing IPO'd at $20. Sunk like a rock to $10. Now, blow it up today, banging on the door of 100. So there's a 10-bagger there for anybody that invested in Group Dynamite. We're highlighting them along with a few other stocks, including Aritzia, which is tearing up the charts as well. I like doing the stock stuff because I like the stock stuff, but lots of times we don't put it in. And if people want it, you just have to say so. We'll put it in more so. But Group Dynamite, unprecedented Q3 results on exceptional 31% comparable store sales. So Group Dynamite delivering absolutely on fire, right? There you go. Canadian retailer, right? Same as Aritzia on fire too. And when I invested in Aritzia, I just went into the store and just sat there for a while with not by myself, with my daughter. I sat in there, I wasn't being creepy. I sat in there and watched the people leaving with packages and said, I'm investing in this thing. Because people are just buying. So.
Doing some market research there by yourself.
There you go. We got some BC news.
Live from the Now Media Newsroom.
So there's lots of pressure building on the BC NDP to recall the legislature and repeal DRIPA. This thing is really getting out of hand. Pressure mounting to repeal that Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act after a court ruling upended the province's mineral claim system. The BC Conservatives said this problem is too great to wait until February. EB, meanwhile, said it will take some time for us to come up with an appropriate amendment for the bill, which was passed unanimously in 2019. Separately, the Independent Contracts and Business Association said EB should immediately recall the legislation and repeal the law. The group's president said, "You cannot bolt a vague UN declaration onto all laws in BC and then be surprised when judges start using it to rewrite provincial laws from the bench." I've interviewed Jeff Moyse, Aboriginal lawyer, as well, I think 4 times now, Jeff Moyse. And it was the BC government that decided to add DRIPA in. They didn't have to, and no other countries really do it, but BC did it, and Canada. And now we're starting to reap the what comes with it. And here's an interview with another Aboriginal lawyer here, and this one is with Global. We'll listen to what he has to say.
Does BC, in your expert opinion, need to repeal, change, or keep DRIPA as is?
Based on where British Columbia finds itself today, I think there's only one answer. DRIPA needs to be repealed.
He literally wrote the book on Aboriginal law. Tom Isaac says last week's BC Court of Appeal ruling on Indigenous mining rights potentially changes all areas of BC law. Isaac says he warned the BC government not to adopt DRIPA, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, but it was approved unanimously by all MLAs in 2019.
There's a paragraph in the decision that's very interesting where the court says essentially it was the legislature that imposed this complex set of rules that are essentially untested at law into British Columbia law. It was the legislature that did that, not the Constitution, not the Supreme Court of Canada.
The legislature is now on a 2-month break. The opposition wants DRIPA repealed and says MLAs should be called back to Victoria immediately.
And again, we had that, when did we interview Jeff Moyse? A month and a half ago, 2 months ago? I don't know, we've interviewed several times, so probably a couple months ago. And he said the same thing, that it's not anything to do with the Constitution. It's BC chose to do this. And now,
but
who invests in BC right now?
They're talking about it like it's a surprise, aren't they? Like, this is not a surprise. People have been warning
Jeff
about
Moyse
this
said
since before it was enacted, this legislation. I mean, and obviously, this is one of those examples where, you often hear people say, oh, politics is getting in the way. This is just politics. That's what this was. It was a unanimous vote in favor of adopting a really vague, sort of abstract UN press release, pretty much. Like an activist's press release. They decided to put that on the statute books as law. I mean, people were saying, you might not want to do that, lads, back then. But it was politics, wasn't it? It's because they thought, they just didn't want to be seen to oppose this. So the BC Liberals and the NDP voted it through. And now here we are, the mess that they created.
And then it's really hard to get investment in British Columbia, and people wonder why. David Eby talks about, there's so many shovel-ready projects in BC. Okay. How many shovels are in the ground, Mr. Eby? Let's move to international news and talk about shovels in the ground.
Live from the Now Media Newsroom.
There's a difference between ready for shovels in the ground and shovels in the ground. And we're going to hear from Kevin Hassett, the guy that likely will become the new Fed chair. We're going to hear from the Fed chair tomorrow and from the Bank of Canada as rate decision comes up. But let's listen to what Kevin Hassett has to say on shovels.
There's a huge amount of positive news that the president is going to be breaking this week about the economy. You know, we've got a person who actually approached the studio with me, walked with me, who's tracking the openings, the groundbreakings for the new factories that are, you know, in the trillions of dollars of announcements that the president's been making. And we're up to almost 30 of those that actually the groundbreakings have happened. And so there's a lot of positive news that's positive for people's jobs, for people's incomes, and for inflation. And President Trump is just going to go out there and remind people of that. But in the end, again, going back to the eye on the horizon, that President Trump's economic policies were profoundly popular just before COVID in his first term because he had $6,500 of income growth after the big tax cuts. And so right now we're going into next year where the typical person who's got no tax on tips, no tax on overtime is probably going to see an extra $1,600 to $2,000. A lot of that will come as tax refunds in the beginning of the year. That kind of stuff is going to make it so that people are going to look at their wallets and say, oh, boy, this guy's really making me better off. And in the end, that's more important than any poll. The final thing I got to say is that we did look at a lot of the sentiment, the softer indicators over the last few weeks, and we found a pattern that I'm sure you guys could find a chart that would show, which is that consumer sentiment it tends to crater when there's a government shutdown. And so we have sort of back-to-back 4% quarters coming in, and then we got the government shutdown and all the chaos related to that. And the sentiment indicators went down, but the hard indicators really didn't. And that's a pattern that we've seen over and over again.
So there's leading indicators and lagging indicators. And you talk about job numbers; those are lagging. Leading indicators are investment, capital investment, and projects that are being put in. They say they have 30 projects with shovels in the ground, and including Brookfield and Cameco with Westinghouse have committed to build 8 nuclear reactors in the United States of America. How many did they announce in Canada? 0. That's right. But these are things that should be copied. Like these are great things for the working class people. No tax on overtime. What a boom that would be. No tax on tips. Great for the service industry that you know they work hard, and then no tax on Social Security as well. Those are great things. Why do we continue? In Canada, they want to figure out a way to tax the seniors. They're talking about how they can go after them for their CPP, and that CPP is a pension plan. They say that they don't deserve that if they have money. It's like that is their pension that they paid into all those years. Kind of a different mindset, isn't it? Doesn't it blow you away? Like a mindset in the United States that we don't want to tax our seniors. In Canada, they're just like, oh, well, you know, they have too much. Take it away from them. Their pension plan.
Yeah, well,
that they paid into
their
whole lives.
Seniors get a slightly better ride in a lot of countries because of the baby bulge, the baby boom. They represent such a large proportion of the electorate that they kind of get what they want. But in Canada, yeah, it's a different thing. I mean, the Liberal Party are the seniors' party now. That's what they represent them. But they're also willing to float these ideas like taxing their pensions and things, aren't they?
Someone said open an ad on CBC channels for Now Media. That's a good idea, actually. Like you want real news instead of with an arrow pointing instead of this government propaganda. If they let us run that ad, that'd be pretty cool, right?
I don't think they would allow it.
Nothing runs like a deer. Nothing runs like a deer. And for those of you that have farmed before, like I have, nothing runs like a John Deere. So here's Trump talking about John Deere.
Because of the tariffs, this is possible. The other thing I'd like to add before going to Scott, and I think it's very important, we're going to also give the tractor companies, John Deere and all of the companies that make the equipment, we're going to take off a lot of the environmental restrictions that they have on machinery. It's ridiculous. I know because I buy a lot of that machinery for different things. We have a lot of big clubs with, you know, hundreds, thousands of acres. And I buy a lot of stuff, and you buy it, it's got so much equipment on it for the environmental, it doesn't do anything, except it makes the equipment much more expensive and much more complicated to work, and it's not as good as the old days. And we're going to take a lot of that nonsense off of the equipment, which is
That's good. Usually you can listen to about 15 seconds of what Donald Trump has to say, and then the next 2 minutes of just him repeating everything he said in the first 15 seconds.
That's his. So he starts off. It's like an academic article submitted to a journal, isn't it? You start off with the abstract.
Yeah, well,
and
he hits you
goes
hard.
into
He
the
hits you hard with the
methodology.
point, and then it just kind of, like, but I mean, that's amazing, right? For John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer, and that's great for farmers. It's absolutely great. And you want some more good news for farmers? Here you go. Here's another clip from DJT.
He was the worst president in the history of our country, by the way, in case anybody has any questions. China committed to over $40 billion of soybean purchases, and that's a commitment. And I asked President Xi if he could even up it. And I think he'll do that. I mean, not a commitment. 40 billion's a commitment, but the soybean farmers are quite happy. Since my successful meeting in South Korea with...
As I said, there's the news right there, and then he'll just go on and talk about some other stuff there.
But also, talk about cringe. These accounts on Twitter, like, they make my skin crawl. You just read them, like, they're so gross. These are just like, I mean, are these people just born slaves, or have they decided to volunteer to become slaves? I could never imagine writing about somebody like Trump or whoever it is in this way. It's just like such repulsive behavior. They disgust me so profoundly. Like Gunter Eagleman's slave as well. Like, ugh. But I would also say, that aside, this is all a bit sketchy, and I'm not sure this is like a great win. So Xi said he will. Okay.
But he has already been.
Well, if he says so, I guess that's going to happen then, isn't it? It's like, that's just like second-hand. We don't even know if it's true.
Apparently.
Plus, China has divested away from U.S. soybeans. So now, if they're going to buy them again, that's, in a way, that's a brag from China. It's like, we can just turn the tap off or on again whenever we want, dependent on your behavior, Orange Man. So, you know, it's like, it's kind of a weakness. It's not just, that's not a strength, but you would never get that if you follow these slave accounts on Twitter, because a slave will never insult his master for obvious reasons.
Apparently, though, they've already been making purchases of soybeans, so there's that. So,
but they also stopped. So stop, start. This is just the same old thing repackaged as a Trump victory by slaves.
You sound like a basketball. Anyway, Pepsi agrees to cut prices by 20% in the United States. What about Canada? Well, you want a Pepsi? Pepsi Generation, man. Pepsi has made an agreement with active investor Elliott Management, committing to cut costs across the company, lower prices. And you know what they also cut? They cut staffing. But they're going to cut prices by 20%. Now, you know, Pepsi is a big brand, and it has a lot of brands underneath it. Pepsi's huge, right? And I saw this on Bloomberg this morning. That's a huge cut. And a lot of people in the United States of America, they love their Pepsi products. And this is Cheetos and Tostados and all that other Quaker Oats, all kinds of stuff. Pepsi's.
Tropicana there. Bubbly. I'm a bubbly addict.
I'm a bubbly guy.
I didn't realize I'm a slave to Pepsi company as well.
And I do like the Tropicana. But no word yet if any of these price cuts are coming to Canada, but they are coming to the United States of America. And again, Pepsi is one of the, like, it's a food conglomerate. It's, you know, it's not just Pepsi. Pepsi, and plus lots of restaurants, everything. What's under Pepsi is it's a huge brand. Huge brand. I was, when I was into that, it's 5-6 Pepsi a day, Coke. I used to say I was a Coke addict. My wife said, don't say that. Pepsi addict, that's okay, right?
What about Doritos addict? You don't want to be a Doritos addict.
You know what? When I was in Tokyo, for some strange reason, for the plane, I bought a bag of Doritos, and I didn't eat it on the plane. And I haven't eaten Doritos forever because it's, you know, it's not exactly, you know, health food. And I sat down and had one, and I ended up finishing the whole bag. So that was probably my first.
You know, they're addictive, aren't they? Pringles as well, but they are. Not so good
some of the brands under Pepsi, other than the drinks themselves, are, you know, Mountain Dew, Gatorade, Rockstar Energy, Tropicana,
Quaker Oats as well,
Dole, Lipton iced tea, Aquafina, Bubbly, Lay's, Doritos, Cheetos, Ruffles, Tostitos, Miss Vicky's, Munchies, Fritos, Smart Mark Popcorn, Quaker Oats, Cap'n Crunch. There's a cereal. That sticks in your teeth. You eat Cap'n Crunch, the more you don't brush your teeth, you can eat the Cap'n Crunch for the rest of the day. Because it just be picking that out of your face. But anyway, it's a big brand for sure. There you go. Good
Massive.
news.
But
Good news for the
oats,
Americans.
how
What's
many
that?
people knew that? I didn't know that. I didn't know Quaker Oats were owned by PepsiCo. So that's kind of like...
It's a huge brand. Life cereal, Quaker granola bars. You probably buy a lot of this for your kids, right? Miranda, Life Water, Ruffles, I don't know, like 7-Up. Tons. Here's Politico getting called out. We need somebody to call out CBC, but listen to this here.
A member of Al-Qaeda. If you're a member of Al-Qaeda, you're a terrorist.
How do you know if that they're members of these gangs? What I'm saying
You mean
is,
the tattoos MS-13 on our knuckles doesn't, that doesn't help it?
those...
Do you have tattoos of Al-Qaeda?
The tattoo
On
did
your-
not
on
say
your wrist?
MS-13. I don't want to get into that.
Oh, of course it does. It's just accidents that the four symbols represent the letters MS. See, this is why Politico is a joke. This is why you are gutter press and fake news. That those four symbols that just happen to comport with the letters MS and the numbers 13 don't, in this case, represent MS-13. You're sitting here live defending a member of MS-13. That's why I regret coming here, because this isn't journalism. This is protecting those who hate America. Shame on you. We are saving lives.
Sir.
Saving lives. How about Maryland fathers compared to Maryland mothers? Like Rachel Marin, mother of 5, raped and murdered and thrown in a ditch. How about Jocelyn Nungare, age 12, raped a mile from her home and thrown in a ditch? It's strange that Politico doesn't do articles about her, that mother, or that 12-year-old girl. Why is that? Why is the MS-13 guy with the knuckle tattoos more important in terms of due process than the lives of 12-year-old girls brutally raped? It's weird that the priorities shift to defending the member of an FTO, but not the children and the women. Dan Crenshaw told me a story once of a 16-year-old girl who was smuggled across this border. The parents paid $5,000 for her to live in America, the land of milk and honey. She ended up locked in a room in New York, raped by more than a dozen men every day for 18 months until she escaped. She went to Dan Crenshaw's office, and I'm no friend of Dan Crenshaw's, okay? He's still got TDS. And that girl said to him, please close the border so another girl doesn't have to be raped by 12 strange men.
He goes on and continues to rant, but
he was hysterical, and I mean that in the true definition of hysteria, going back to the 19th century. There, he was acting like a mentally unwell female. Very, very, very strange man. Even though, broadly speaking, I mean, I think most people probably agree with what he said, but the delivery, the way he chose to comport himself, as he said, was a little bit extraordinary.
I think he was
strange fellow.
I think he was just mad at the way that the media has been portraying it, and not the victim seems to have no rights. And we've seen that over and over here in Canada as well. We seem to have more stories for the person committing the offenses. You see that in the UK as well, right? We've seen people being jailed in the UK for calling the rapist a pig.
Well, there was a story recently, wasn't there? It was not quite that word, but yeah, we've seen that in Europe. That one, that was Sweden, I think, wasn't it? The pig one, yeah. But I just think, I don't know, engage, like, I just like a bit of intellectual honesty, and I would just prefer if he engaged that interviewer, that journalist, honestly. You know, she said, we don't necessarily know that they're members of these organizations. And then he said about the tattoo, it's like, she was on about Al-Qaeda from anyway, but, you know, it is possible. Organizations like MS-13 and these cartels and things, you know, they have like what are in effect child soldiers, like they recruit kids. It is possible, if you just want to have a serious conversation based in reality, that you could get MS-13 tattooed on your knuckles as a kid, as a child. Then, you know, that's not you like being a voluntary member of that organization, is it? So I would prefer that level of seriousness, but maybe that's just me. I like my gourmet intellectual discussions rather than this.
I guess the question
It's
to
not
you
even
then-
McDonald's. This is a
I guess-
Costco hot dog of an intellectual discussion.
I guess the question to you is, where do you err then? Right now, we're erring on the side of the criminals most times and saying that everybody's innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, that's a good
Not
point.
enough. You know what I mean? Like, and then so the victims seem to be
That's
really
a very
suffering.
important point.
Yeah.
And you've made it in a very civilized and intelligent way. If he'd said that, I would have nodded my head. But it's just, I'm not sure what use it is to have these hysterical buffoons making points, even if the points that they make are good ultimately and accurate. How are you advancing the cause if that point is made by a buffoon, a ridiculous clown like this, And I often feel like with a lot of people on the sort of in the Trumpy verse, but in fairness, it's probably even worse for the Democrats when you get somebody. It's possible that somebody like Ilhan Omar or whatever could make a good point, but it's her, so she makes it in such a ridiculous way that she discredits the point. These are like straw men, constantly. They constantly discredit the arguments that they put forward.
Well, here's J.D. Vance talking to the EU.
Germany's entire defense is subsidized by the American taxpayer. There are thousands upon thousands of American troops in Germany today. Do you think that the American taxpayer is going to stand for that if you get thrown in jail in Germany for posting a mean tweet? Of course they're not, right? So the point that I try to make to our European friends, and I think that there are friends, I believe that, I know President Trump does, is that friendship is based on shared values. You do not have shared values if you're jailing people for saying we should close down our border. You don't have shared values if you cancel elections because you don't like the result, and that happened in Romania. You do not have shared values if you're so afraid of your own people that you silence them and shut them up.
There you go, J.D. Vance.
That divide is like, the gap keeps growing and growing, doesn't it, there between the US and Europe?
Yeah. That freedom of speech is becoming a bigger thing. We played that from the Undersecretary yesterday when she was in Europe there. And now Jamie Dimon weighs in. Jamie Dimon, one of the big financial wizards of Wall Street here. And let's listen to what Jamie Dimon has to say.
It takes 27 nations, to make a decision. They let their military drop dramatically. It's very bureaucratic, which is why part of the reason that they lost Britain to the EU, which I think makes it bad for both of them, by the way. And so you got to be honest about this. So, and those tectonic plates may move over 20 years. But if we ever write a book about how the West was lost, it will be because of the following. It will be because of we didn't get our act together here, and we go through all the policies here, that we didn't have the strongest military in the world, and that we allowed Europe to fall apart. And so I have a slightly different point of view about Europe. They have some wonderful things, but they've gone from 90% of the GDP of America to 65. That's not because America did anything bad to them. It's their own bureaucracy, their own cost, they do some wonderful things on their safety nets, but they've driven business out, they've driven investment out, they've driven innovation out. It takes 27 nations.
I mean, a lot of people.
You could say they did do something bad to them, though. You could say they converted them into vassals, and they made them feel safe, and they took away their sort of foreign policy, independent foreign policy. They took away their military in a sense because they said, "Don't worry, we'll look after you," kind of thing. And it's almost like that thing. It's like, are you really helping someone if you just do everything for them? Because you're not going to make them independent. They're not going to be able to thrive by themselves. So in a sense, it's almost like the Americans have damned Europe by trying to protect it almost. I mean, I'm not saying that they did it with complete benevolence. They obviously had their own reasons to do that, but that's kind of what's happened, isn't it? It's like they've forgotten how to grow their own food because people keep giving them food, kind of thing, ready-made.
And a lot of people calling into question the EU, including many of the member countries right now, because it seems to, including the UK when it left with Brexit, it seems to have become this big bureaucratic monstrosity that is not delivering for many of the countries and making rules, and we're going to get into a little bit of here, rules and laws and stuff like that, and punishing member nations and that. And all of this was supposedly to become a big trading bloc, to give it power as a trading bloc. That was the whole purpose of the EU when it was created, in one currency, so they didn't have a bunch of currency fluctuations between all the nations. And we've seen with, the Greek currency and that, so that was supposed to give them all that stability. But at what cost, I guess, is the real question. At what cost?
But we should remember as well that a lot of these people have their own motivations, like Jamie Dimon.
Mm-hmm.
The financial sector has been punished by the European Union loads of times. They take fines off them and create new regulations. It annoys them to no end. And then the tech bros, a lot of the social media companies and all that, they've just been like relentlessly fined and regulated by the EU, and they hate the EU, and they have, to a reasonable extent, sponsored the Trump administration. They helped get him into office. So there's some pretty grubby stuff going on here in the background, which is not related to questions of civilization or anything like that. It's just purely, I want more money, and I'm going to wrap it up in questions of civilization and whatever. But I think simultaneously there is also the moral and philosophical and historical side. Like, they both exist simultaneously.
But I mean, if I had to pick one organization or one country that is one big bureaucratic monstrosity, I would pick the European Union first. But
well, China is 100% China's first. I would say China is just like unfathomably dense bureaucracy. But yeah,
but I mean,
in terms of like the Western countries, yeah.
But I would say in China they do have like a common people kind of thing, whereas in the EU they have a bunch of diverse groups of people that are being melted into one, and they don't seem to be melting very well recently. And the UK was the first to break out. Is there more coming? Maybe. But Trump dunks on Zelensky here. Let's listen to what he has saying. He said this before when Zelensky met at the White House. He said, "Well, I mean, when's the last time we had an election?" This has come up time and time again.
Is it time for Ukraine to hold an election, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a long time. It hasn't been doing particularly well. Yeah, I think it's time. I think it's an important time to hold an election. They're using war not to hold an election, but I would think the Ukrainian people would, should have that choice, and maybe Zelensky would win. I don't know who would win, but they haven't had an election in a long time. They talk about a democracy, but it gets to a point where it's not a democracy anymore.
Is it time for Ukraine to hold an election?
Yeah.
So we should say, not unusual for a country at war like that to suspend elections. Not unusual at all, really. But you can make that. There are people in Ukraine making that argument as well. So it's like,
did the UK
it's not
have
like
an
he's
election
just
during the
being
war?
a cheeky bugger here.
The UK had an election during the war, did it not?
No, it didn't.
It didn't? Well, there you go.
10 years, 1935 to 1945. That's how long that parliament lasted. It's not unusual. It's not even slightly unusual for that to happen.
But
and it's obvious why. How could you have an election when you're fighting for your own survival? It's just madness. But something that the British did do, though, is that they maintained the democratic system as best they could in terms of the House of Commons, and people would raise criticisms. There wasn't a kind of like, it didn't become a full-blown authoritarian state or anything like that. They maintained an open society, but it's very difficult to have a general election during a war like that. I mean, there were arguments that when the Nazis were obviously beaten in about 1943, something like that, 1944, that there should have been an election then. There's an argument made there. You'll see historians and whatnot make that argument, but it's not hard to grasp. Surely, I'm sure Trump can understand. It's very, very difficult to have an election when you're at war.
I think what he's pushing for, he thinks the two of them hate each other so much, Zelensky and Putin, that there is no chance of reconciliation until they find a way to move past the two of them. I think it's a personal thing almost. But here is Zelensky. He went to the UK. And in there, we're also joined by Macron and Keir Starmer. And and the German guy, Chancellor Schulz. You always say it that way, right? Schulz. There you go. Let's listen in on this one.
This discussion, and thank you, Vladimir, for being with us together with Friedrich. I think we all support Ukraine, and we all support peace and peace negotiations to have a sustainable, a robust peace. And I think we have a lot of cards in our hands. The financing and the furniture of equipment and training programs to Ukraine, the fact that Ukraine is resisting in this war, and the fact that the Russian economy is starting to suffer, especially after our latest sanctions and the US sanctions. And now I think the main issue is a convergence between our common positions, Europeans and Ukrainians, and the US to finalize these peace negotiations and re-engage a new phase in the best possible conditions for Ukraine, for the Europeans, and for our collective security. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good. Weren't those train buddies, those guys, those three? Weren't they the train buddies? Schultz?
It's just the B team, isn't it? It's just the losers talking about. They're talking about the big game. It's like, you're not playing. You're not going to get on the pitch. Like, what are you on about?
Did you pick up that Macron? You know, when you're successful when people start speaking your language, and we'll know that we've made it when people start saying we're the best undiscovered show, Canadian news commentary show on the internet. The language that you heard Macron say, we have all the cards. Who said that we have all the cards? Yeah. Who says that?
Indeed, yeah. It's pitiful to think France used to be like a seriously great country, you know, and obviously so did Britain and Germany.
Both
to see them sort of relegated to this kind of pathetic situation, it's not nice to look at, is it?
Both Starmer and Starmer, Macron and Starmer, very low in the polls, very, very unpopular. And here's one more from Trump at that political interview on Zelensky, calling him P.T. Barnum. Remember the three-ring circus? I think that's what we call our parliament here. But let's listen in on Trump here.
He's a great salesman. I call him P.T. Barnum. You know who P.T. Barnum was, right?
I do.
One of the greatest on earth. He could sell any product at any time. That was his expression. I can sell any product at any time. It was true. He said, doesn't matter whether it works or not. But he's P.T. Barnum. You know, he got crooked Joe Biden to give him $350 billion. And look what it got. It got him about 25% of his country is missing. He's a great salesman. I call him P.T. Barnum.
That is vintage Trump, that, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's Dasha Burns there, and she's the one that other person went all ranty on her, right? So this interview seemed to go a little better.
I've seen this interview, and she was like very, very tolerant of his, you know, Trumpisms. He did the obligatory, it's almost like he's testing the water. He did the obligatory stolen election thing. Usually that really triggers reporters, and they're like, you know, there's no evidence that, but she didn't do anything. She just let loads of things pass, which is very unusual. It shows that it's like an adaptation, I think, from the sort of left liberal mainstream media. They're starting to adapt to Trump, and they're not bothering anymore being antagonistic and jumping in and correcting them and stuff like that. It's just all about sort of having a rapport with them, and I think she did have a rapport with them. It was very interesting to watch that.
Well, Hungary is like still in there in the hot water, and they said, we said yesterday it was cheaper for them to not take the migrants than it was to house them. You said you compared it to the UK when it was housing the migrants. So
look, man, that so many studies have been done. Just look yourself, I say to the audience. Look at, like, particularly the ones that have come out of Denmark that show that immigrants, they broke it down into nationality, and immigrants from basically everywhere except Europe and the United States ended up being a net fiscal negative, like a drag on the Danish taxpayer, on the Danish government. The evidence, and that's just one like fragment of it, the evidence is in when it comes to migration, specifically to Europe, what works, what doesn't work. And certainly these people who they refer to as migrants, they're not migrants really, there's something else. You know, they're like illegal migrants who are exploiting loopholes, or they're exploiting the broken legal system in the European Union. They're claiming asylum, but they're not asylum seekers. They're not like true immigrants. They're something else. They're opportunists or adventurers or whatever. They particularly are just a gigantic drag in terms of what they
Orban
cost
has said,
rather than what they contribute. So it's a no-brainer. And I'm sure Viktor Orban, he makes a lot of media appearances, Viktor Orban. I'm sure he's said this explicitly somewhere. You could probably find it somewhere.
He has said that they're drawing a red line, and Hungary will not implement the measures. The rebellion begins, and he accuses Brussels of trying to force Hungary to pay even more to take migrants and declares it unacceptable. And then joining him in this fray is Poland now. Poland. And the EU agrees to exempt Poland from migrant relocation obligations starting in 2026. The EU Migration Pact allows member states to either accept relocated migrants from the frontline countries or pay $20,000 for each individual they decline to take. Wow, what a game the EU is playing there, eh?
And that's because in Poland, I mean, the leader of Poland is Donald Tusk still, isn't it?
Yeah.
Donald Tusk.
Just one.
And he is a former European Union, very high-ranking European Union official. He's like a liberal, considered a liberal. But they had elections in Poland not so long ago, and the right did very well. I think they won, like, what did they win? The presidency or something like that? So I think maybe the EU is feeling the pressure, and they're trying to give them a valve to let off some air. But Poland is a very different. Poland's not like France or the Netherlands or whatever. Like Poland is a very complicated issue for the European Union. They want to tread very lightly, I think, because the Poles, they're not interested in this because the Poles were obviously, as most people know, they were subject to colonial rule by the Russians.
Wasn't Hungary in that same boat? Yes, it was.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the brutal
Czech
truth
Republic is making noise too. The Czech Republic is making noise as well.
Slovakia as well.
Yeah. All those countries
the
that were
brutal truth is,
Eastern Bloc countries.
Yeah. The really harsh truth, though, is that Poland is like more important than Hungary. It's like Poland is indispensable to the European Union.
Hey,
for so many reasons, geographically, but it's just so important. Whereas Hungary is a smaller country and it's geographically less significant. It's less important to Europe, landlocked. So I think the EU is just, as usual, has been quite cynical. And one rule for Hungary and another rule for Poland.
I must make my way to Hungary one day for my mother's sake. The Danube River and the Budapest, they do not have that in Poland. Come on.
No, I'd say, but I'm not talking about the quality of the civilization there. Hungary is like a really amazing civilization for sure. I like their language, everything, their origins, historical origins kind of came. They're very different people, the Hungarians. They're not like the rest of the Europeans. They're not. They have their own language family, which they are. I think it's only Finland is a member of that family. It's not like. I think it's not even the Indo-European language family, but Hungary is like an endlessly fascinating country. But when it comes to like brutal geopolitics, Poland is like the 4th or 5th most important country in the EU. Hungary is not quite as high up the list, I don't think.
I took a team of 20 teenage girls to Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Finland, and that for hockey and ringette. And I was staying in Austria, and one of the innkeepers there found out I was Hungarian or whatever, and she proceeded to tell me that Austria ruled Hungary for, I don't know, 100 years or something like that. And I was like, okay. Like, what would you like me to do with that information? I was just like, okay. We ruled Hungary for 100 years? I'm like, okay. That's awesome.
You do get stuff like that happening in Europe, though, don't you? These sort of like crazy tribalistic blood feuds that go back 2,000 years or something like that. They're
just letting me
resurrected over dinner. It's like,
she was letting me know she's my boss, I guess.
Yeah.
AI, EIO, AI. And here's the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, talking about AI. And this is how AI is so important. This is what I keep stressing. AI, and it's all about energy. Let's listen. I'm going to get an energy one, so you got to stick around for it. This is really good, though.
The future of American warfare is here, and it's spelled AI. As technologies advance, so do our adversaries. But here at the War Department, we are not sitting idly by. Under the leadership of President Trump, America will lead the charge on this technological transformation by revolutionizing the way we win. And that's why today we are unleashing GenAI.mil. This platform puts the world's most powerful frontier AI models, starting with Google Gemini, directly into the hands of every American warrior. At the click of a button, AI models on GenAI can be utilized to conduct deep research, format documents, and even analyze video or imagery at unprecedented speed. Building on the great work of Undersecretary Emil Michael and his team,
That's good.
we will continue.
That's good. Do you know there is Google, I'm not Google, but there's glasses out there right now, smart glasses, right now, that you can put on, and you can be walking in a crowd, and it'll identify that person for you if you've never met that person before. It searches, does face recognition, searches social media, finds that person's account, and tells you that person's name.
Isn't that in the new Mission Impossible films? Sure, Tom Cruise has got a pair of those glasses. It's pretty amazing though, that fiction is becoming reality.
I watched a Google Gemini presentation where the guy put the glasses on to do the oil change in his car, and the glasses highlighted where with the stuff that he had to, the bolts he had to take off, the wrench he had to use, everything, and talked him through everything. It's coming.
But how big, in a military context, a military setting, how big will the sort of universal translator be? Where you can have,
huge.
I don't know if it would be glasses or if it would be like buds or something, where you can hear any language in the world. You can just understand it almost simultaneously. That's like, if you think about the Afghanistan war in particular and how reliant the Americans and British and the rest of them were on translators, who occasionally would turn the gun around and massacre a squadron of troops or something, or be on the other side like a double agent. And also just think how limiting that is when you have to walk around. You have to have this guy who's like an intermediary, might not even be translating it accurately for all you know.
You want to see the future?
Huge. And like the Navy SEALs and things like that, they could go in and they can actually like think about it in terms of tactics. If you can actually hear what they're saying, it's just huge.
It's already there. That technology is already there. And if you want to see the future, watch Star Trek. There you go. Most of the stuff's coming. Other than
certainly. How true is that? Yeah, I mean, even doors that open automatically and universal translator, obviously.
So there's a lot of people.
I don't think we're going to be having phases anytime soon.
There's a lot of people, especially in Canada, that say we need to regulate and that AI is being overhyped. And there's a lot of people in the finance media say it's being overhyped, that it's a bubble. It's a bubble up. Here's a former Google CEO, Eric Schmidt, on why AI is not a bubble. If it's anything, it's being underhyped, and I agree with this. This is absolutely huge. And that's why we have it on this show. You're not going to learn this on CBC. The CBC is going to teach you how to virtue signal and act sanctimonious. If you want to learn how to act sanctimonious, head over to the CBC. They'll teach you how to be that. I dated a Klingon, someone said. Well, hey, why would a grok moto? I don't even know. But anyway, I don't know. I can't speak Klingon.
Yes. AI will be able to fix that, I'm sure.
This is important. This is from Chamath, and this is important. This is the piece that's all important. Chamath was former Canadian as well. Where does he live? The United States of America. And he's been on a Canadian stage recently, and he said it's all about energy. But look at this cool thing. A new product, a new customer, a new financing, introducing Superpower, a 42 megawatt natural gas turbine optimized for AI data centers built on supersonic technology. Superpower launches 1.21 gigawatt order from Cruise AI. Look at that. What is that? What is it running off of? No business case. That's what it's running off of. LNG.
It's running off planet-destroying hydrocarbons.
42 megawatts. That's 42 million joules every second. There you go. Wow.
Can you imagine trying to be an innovator in this area in Canada though, or British Columbia? Let's imagine trying to knock something like that. It's just, that's when it gets sad. You see that the Americans, they have space in their culture for this, to innovate and to change and adapt and grow and compete. But we just don't. Europe doesn't.
You hit the key word. You hit the key word. Compete. That's what a lot of Canadians right now, especially the CBC watchers and Lightning Rod, they believe we're entitled to something instead of competing. We need to compete. We have the basic foundations of what to compete with. We have the LNG. We have the LNG. We have the raw material. We just don't have the political will. That's the problem.
But
you know what 1.2 gigawatts powers, though? You know what 1.2 gigawatts would do? 1 million homes. That's how much juice is going to be jammed out of this. I mean, the orders for 1.2 gigawatts, but this particular superpower unit is 42 megawatts, right? So you need 1,000 of those megawatts to create a gigawatt, right?
It's you talk about the CBC and lightning rod. I like that gratuitous shank for lightning rod. But you're talking about their attitude to things like this. I feel often the attitude is, I don't know about lightning rod, he can defend himself, but I feel like the attitude that predominates and is sort of like summed up by the CBC is that we're just automatically rich. And we just always will be. It's fine. Like, we're Canada, guys. Like, it doesn't matter. So we can indulge in these luxuries, and we can hobble ourselves, and we can say no again and again and again. Somebody can say, I've got this idea for an LNG. And just, no, the environment. It's like, I've got this idea for a road. No, First Nations or something like that. Like, we seem to think that we have that luxury, and that we can just say no again and again and again and again and still be rich. And I just feel that's at the center of this ideology. Is that they don't realize how easy it is, or it's actually quite hard, but they don't realize that it is possible for a rich country to become a poor one. It's happened in the past, and it will happen again. But they're almost like these animals that were in New Zealand, like these birds that didn't have an instinct to be afraid of predators because there were no predators. You know, it's like they've lost that survival instinct.
So if you're not too sanctimonious yet, you haven't been tricked into canceling your X account, go on there and follow this Blake guy, Blake Scholl, and Chamath for sure. Follow. And he'll explain. You can go read the thread on this thing here. And if Mark Carney saw this new superpower supersonic turbine here, what he would see is carbon capture credits. He's just like, Brookfield could make some juice off that. Right? How do we tap that? Anyway, we're at the end of our show, and we had some room here, so we got a couple of jokes here for you. These are jokes. Don't get all worked up. They're just jokes.
I think that is actually accurate as well. If I try and assess the accuracy of this meme, because it would count. I think mental illness would count as like a disability, maybe, so it would count as mocking a disability, and I think that's covered by this legislation.
We're trying to get in all the memes we can before they pass Bill C9. So
we're gonna have to do a massive meme section.
We're trying to get them all in because Bill C9
the day before they pass it.
We have one more for you. This one's for you, your friend and leader, Keir Starmer. Elon Musk just posted this up there too, right? Free speech has not been banned in the UK, and we will arrest anyone who says it has. That is the ultimate catch-22, right?
It's remarkable, isn't it, that he keeps on coming out with that nonsense. He keeps on saying, we've had free speech in this country for a number of years. How could you do that? Just on a human level, how could you be so deceptive? How could you lie so freely?
Do you have to fill your mouth with marbles or marshmallows before you talk like Keir Starmer?
It's like halfway to Kermit the Frog, a little bit higher up.
The Liberals are apparently melting down in that press conference. We'll put it in maybe tomorrow on that, standing together. I mean, there's obviously fractures in the Liberal Party over this MOU. But
yeah, and they said there's not. There's another example of brazen mendacity.
And then the best one is that Liberal MP melting down about ethics are being weaponized. You mean because you're breaking ethics? That's the weaponization of it? Just like any law that is being applied to the Liberals is weaponization. Any law applied to the Conservatives is just.
That's pretty much how it works, isn't it? And it's possible to maintain that kind of fallacious reasoning if you control what matters, like the media, universities, things like that, and your ideas, your ideology. If that dominates a society, you can get away with things like that because it becomes instinct. Like we were talking about the jail thing earlier. If it becomes the instinct of a reporter to not ask the questions that we were talking about, then Bob's your uncle, really. That's how you maintain control.
Yeah, and that's our show for today. We're back tomorrow. We're trying to get part of that $1.55 billion. I don't think they're doing very well with it. Do you think? Do you think they're actually doing well with their $1.55 billion? Are they doing a good job for Canada?
Well, if you want to know the answer to that question, look at the latest polling data. Last time I looked, the Liberals are in front, so they are doing a good job.
I talked to a couple well-to-do people, and they said their kids are in the 20s, and they said they don't even know what CBC is or CTV. They don't watch it. They get all their stuff online from the really big...
They also don't vote, so who cares?
Exactly.
Who cares?
Who cares? You got to do the hand motion if you're going to do who cares. You got to throw the hand up. Come on, man. Get it right. All right. That's our show for today. Back tomorrow, 9 a.m. I do have Renee Merrifield on with the Beyond the Ballot today at noon, though. She's really good. And we'll talk a lot about David Eby and the stuff that's happened in the Conservative Party as well in British Columbia. With that said, thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.